Hi, thank you for sticking around. My name is Alfredo Torrico. This is I will share today a project on congestion pricing. Joint work with Natthawut, Boon, Nikhil with the audience, Andrea, Lodi, and Hugo Mainguy. So we all know that traffic leads to negative impacts of the quality of life, specifically in money and hours lost, flight delays, and environment. For that reason, several cities are turning to congestion pricing to kind of address these concerns and also budget concerns. One of the cases is Bogota and also New York City. They have been considering congestion pricing for more than 10 years or so. So in some part motivated by technology because it has enabled like data-driven solutions, in part because mobile applications can allow for charge specific prices and so on. But these data-driven solutions have some challenges. Specifically, one is like there are multiple objectives. So like revenue, efficiency, and equity. But also it's because specific policies can lead to different behaviors in users, and it's hard to predict because users interact, and then it's hard to some way to kind of see the outcome in advance. Among other challenges, such as political challenges, we already know that in New York City, the plan was already suspended recently without any further notice. So our contribution in this context is to provide a tractable, flexible framework for equitable congestion pricing. So we extend the model proposed by John Cominetti in 2008. This is the Markovian traffic equilibrium model. So we allow for multiple agent types and also monetary costs kind of account for congestion pricing. And also we include outside options that allow agents to choose an alternative, such as power sources. So we're showing in this setting that equilibrium exists and it's unique. Okay? But more importantly, we use this framework to study congestion pricing in Bogota. We calibrate the demand collected by our industry partner to evaluate different pricing schemes. Kind of like the easier pricing scheme is uniform, but the price is the same for everyone, but more with the hope of reaching like higher levels of equity. You can think of like per stratum, personalized pricing. And also we can have something more complex as per area pricing, like specifically, so the cities are priced. So our empirical findings are twofold. One is that uniform pricing is highly inequitable in every single metric that we consider in our study. And second, area pricing can serve as a proxy between uniform pricing and for a per stratum pricing, in the sense that area pricing can achieve some sort of levels of welfare as personalized pricing, but also can provide more revenue than uniform pricing. Okay, so the literature here is extensive. I'm not planning to cover it, but for now, we, to the best of our knowledge, there is no work that has focused on a stochastic model and equity. Okay, so let's jump into the model. Bayona community proposed this stochastic model to capture variability perception as opposed to the deterministic case in which users perceive the deterministic costs. However, they consider the same expected hard cost for all users. Okay, so essentially there is only one type of user. And the variabilities are only arbitrary. This might be true for time costs, but not necessarily for monetary costs. Different types of agents, they have different perception costs, lower income population and less willing to pay for driving a certain roads, and higher income population maybe can afford certain price increases. Okay, so in this setting, we can consider a directed graph. There is a set of strata, different agent types S. And each of the stratum S has a subset of the nodes that are going to correspond to the destinations. For the demand of the OD pair is going to be denoted as GID of S, which is a negative value. And then in this network, there are going to be these non-atomic users that are making a stochastic routing decisions across the network. Okay, so now the question is how this demand flow kind of like go through the network. Okay, so in this stochastic model, it's an arc-based decision process, which at each node, users of the stratum S chooses the arc with the lowest random cost to go. You may imagine that a driver goes to the node I, and then observes all the arcs available, and then the random cost to go to the destination D, and then it chooses the lowest random cost to go. So you can think as like a Bellman principle. Okay. So this process defines several equations. Like I'm gonna be a little bit vague here. So one equation is like the fixed point equation for stratum S, meaning that the expected optimal cost that goes from I to D kind of depends also on the expected optimal cost of the subsequent nodes. That's the Bellman. Okay. So the expected optimal cost is there are two terms. Okay, it's the term corresponding to the expected cost of the arc, plus the expected optimal cost that go from J to D. Okay, so again, the users are observing this random cost because there is some, we can put. Okay, well, where is it? Technology is not in my side today. Okay, so anyway, so there is a variability, percentage variability, this epsilon, which.
Just a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Are they minimizing their average expected cost or the realization?
The expected cost to go plus this variability. So the optimal decision.
So they don't observe the random part when they make this decision.
No. Okay, so also in this decision process, you can imagine there is a Markov chain over the network. Okay, so at each node I, there will be a transition probability to the next node. And the transition probability is simply, well, I'm going to choose the probability that I choose J is that it has the lowest random cost to go toward the destination D. Okay, so this induces some flow conservation because the flow that enters node I kind of splits among the nodes, okay, according to those transition probabilities. Okay. So the flow that enters node I is equal to the demand that enters in that node that goes to destination D plus the incoming flow from that node. Okay. So finally, the flow that goes through arc A is just simply the sum over the fraction of flow that goes through the arc. Okay. So this is the flow that enters node I times the probability of transitioning in that arc.
Yes. Right. These are costs without tolls?
Sorry?
Without the congestion tolls?
I'm going to go to that.
Okay,
So in some sense, this expected cost of the arc have two components, time components and the monetary components. Yeah, good question. Okay, here. So let's say that we have, so these users for each stratum S has some sensitivity to time and price. Okay, so the expected cost of the arc is going to be composed by two components. One monetary component that depends on the price of that arc, possibly personalized to S. Okay, and some factor of the sensitivities. You can imagine this is a willingness to pay. Plus the time cost, which is simply a function of the flow. Okay, it's an increasing function of the flow. Okay. Okay, so the Markovian traffic equilibrium in this setting is a vector F that satisfies all these equations that I mentioned. Okay, it satisfies if f of A is equal to the sum of the fraction of the flow, where the flow satisfies the flow conservation, and there is a fixed point equation that is giving you the transition probability. But as long as the time is equal to the function of the flow, okay, that is needed. Okay. So in this setting, there is a unique Markovian traffic equilibrium, which can be found via smooth convection. Okay, so binary community cannot be applied directly here, and actually our analysis rely on the separability of the cost, because the part that depends on the strata do not have a flow dependent. Okay, so that's crucial for the analysis. Okay, actually the theorem holds in an under general setting. You can imagine that the sensitivity to price and time depends also on the OD pair, and also you can imagine a more complex cost function. So the theorem holds as long as the cost function of the strata, the monetary cost function, does not depend on the flow. Okay, so this is nice because it gives us an algorithm. So the algorithm that we have is a first order descent method with a subroutine, which is a fixed point integration. Just not going to go into details, just to jump into the application moment. Okay, so some additional more details. You can imagine that for our application, users are making choices according to multinomial logic, but also we include an outside option. So agents can make, at the beginning of the trip, decide either to take the trip by car or go or take the public transit. So you can imagine this as a model in like 2 layers in network, in which you have a dummy node receiving the original demand, and then the demand is split according to those that chooses to start the car trip versus those that decide to go to the public transit. Okay, so the theorem also holds when adding these outside options and those not options. Okay, so prices lead to equilibria. Okay, so for a fixed set of prices, we can compute equilibrium. But then equilibrium leads to a specific objective value that we want to test. Okay, one of the objective values is welfare, and the other one is revenue. So let me define you that. So given a price vector B, we're gonna compute this equilibrium flow that depends on the price. Okay, so the stratum welfare is gonna be an average over all OD pairs of 2 parties. If they start the trip, I'm gonna compare the time that it would take me to go from I to D, if there is no congestion pricing, with respect to the time and monetary cost at price P and equilibrium. Okay, but if I don't take a trip, then I compare the time with no congestion pricing with the outside option cost. Okay, the total welfare is simply just a sum over all strata, and the total revenue is just a sum over all strata and hours of flow that are times what you collected in that. Okay, so we want to optimize through prices to obtain the Pareto curves between the stratum welfare and total welfare, and the stratum welfare and total revenue. So as I mentioned, I'm not gonna stop here for a bit, but uniform price, we test different pricing scheme. One of them is uniform pricing, the same for all strata and primary arcs. We are just charging high capacity roads. Also, we test per stratum pricing that depends on the strata, and per area pricing that depends on the geographical location of the arc. So you can imagine that ideally per stratum pricing would do better, and uniform pricing has to do better because you can mimic uniform pricing, and per area pricing also can mimic uniform pricing. Right? Okay, we don't have much time, but so Bogota. So Bogota, socioeconomically classify districts and blocks in district from 1 to 6, where 1 is the poorest and 6 is the wealthiest. You can see here in the map that most of the wealthy population lives in the north east of the city, and the low-income population lives towards the southwest. The historic center of the city is around here. So we consider a set of strata composed of low income, which is going to be a strata 1 and 2, mid income just stratum 3, and then high income is going to be strata 4 and 6. Okay, so the network data we obtained it from OpenStreetMap networks. We just simply chose a center of the city and then a radius of 10 kilometers. Okay, so we can actually we reduce this to make it tractable, and that resulted in roughly 500 nodes and 1,200 arcs. So here in blue, I'm depicting the secondary roads, and in red are the primary roads. And we split this area by northwest, southeast. Okay. So we obtained the demand data from a company called Clear Road, which piloted an application centric to application to charge congestion prices. Let me just skip for a bit this, but simply we can see if we obtain, if we plot the percentage of trips between areas, okay, we can see that most of so bars of the same color sum up to 1, okay, and that corresponds to different strata. So you can observe that most of the trips for low income goes from south to west, somehow kind of like correlated with the segregation of the city. Okay, and the same for high income, which goes from east to east. This part. Okay, so that we test is that, well, so distributed to price is that lower strata are more sensitive than higher strata. And for the outside option, we assume we take parameters that lower strata are more likely to take the outside option. And for for the monetary cost function, only primary rows are priced, and we're going to pay for per distance. Robustness analysis show that the only parameters that matter in our model are the willingness to pay, the monotonic order of the willingness to pay. Okay, so just before the results, we test this price grid. It's essentially the same range for all the pricing, but for personalized pricing, we of course consider an order over the prices. We are charging less to low income than mid income and so on. But for the per area pricing, we have a couple of 4 components that lead to more than 6,000 combinations. That may not sound a lot, but it is a lot because we actually had to use acceleration techniques to reduce the computational time from potentially months to 7 days and actually lead to 300, 400 gigabytes of storage. Okay, so for one set of prices, we run the algorithm, obtain this output equilibrium and the transition probabilities and so on, to obtain then to simulate with these probabilities the choices made by the users, and we compute several metrics that I want to show you. Okay, so as I mentioned before, uniform pricing is negatively impacts low income in every single metric. Primary row usage, proportion of trips started, welfare speed. It actually produces the least revenue among all the pricing schemes. And even at the revenue optimal price, which you can see here, this is a plot for revenue. In gray, you can see the total revenue. Okay, and in color, you see the revenue collected by each of the strata. So you can see that 500 here is the optimal price, and we will see in the next plot that there is no effect. It's not effective for translation prices because people are still starting. Okay. More interestingly, here I'm plotting the proportion of primary rows that are used. So you can see obviously that the use of primary rows decreases in gray, the total use of primary rows. But you can see that it affects most the low income in green because at price 0, it actually was using more primary rows, but then it decreases the contribution of that towards the total. Okay, and of course in yellow you can see high income using more primary rows out of the total. As I mentioned, here is the proportion of strips started. Then you can see that it affects again at low income because it decreases faster than the rest. And what I mentioned is that at an optimal price of 500, still a substantial amount of the trips are started. So actually, uniform pricing is not effective for congestion to reduce. Okay, so let me finish with a little bit with this Pareto curve. So here I'm plotting the welfare by stratum and total welfare. Okay, in color I have different pricing schemes, and the shapes indicates which stratum I'm comparing. Okay, so circle corresponds to low income, a triangle corresponds to mid income, and so on. We can see that basically in green, the personalized pricing Pareto dominates uniform pricing, which is we kind of expected, but it's achieving higher levels of stratum welfare. Okay, so what you want is to be to the top right. So you want to increase total welfare and increase welfare minister. Okay. Know that for welfare revenue at 0 is 0 by definition, but it's not interesting at that point because it's not generating revenue, which is one of the objectives of this. So actually, area pricing, as you can see, achieves higher total welfare because it's towards more to the right. Okay, and actually, it is achieving pretty close levels of stratum welfare compared to the green curves. Also, Pareto dominates the uniform pricing here in red. So the best for low income is to actually charge maximal prices to the other strata, which you can see in the 1600, 1600, and 0. Okay, or the least demanded area, which corresponds to these values here. Similar insight can be observed when you plot actually the Pareto curves for stratum welfare and total revenue. You can see that area pricing naturally interpolates between uniform pricing and personalized pricing. Actually, we can see that these two more complex pricing are achieving more revenue than uniform pricing towards the right. Okay, so let me just finish. Data-driven congestion pricing is challenging because of multiple objectives. We present this flexible framework to the type, congestion pricing, and different metrics and pricing schemes. We can see that uniform pricing negatively impacts low income in every single metric, but per stratum pricing can bring benefit to lower income groups at the expense of higher income groups. And area pricing nicely interpolates between the both. So it is maybe easier to implement area pricing than per stratum pricing and achieves higher levels of welfare and revenue. But benefits of area pricing are correlated with the network and the demand segregation. Thank you very much.